Harbor Freight has 3 angle grinders priced under $50. Which one, if any of them, should you buy? Well, I bought all 3. I bought all 3 so that I could performance test them and review them for you. I'll be doing a real-world performance testing of each one of them. I'll go over key features, pros and cons, and price. I also bought Harbor Freight's $100 Hercules grinder. When we're done reviewing these 3, we'll compare them against this guy. It seems like Harbor Freight has streamlined their angle grinder selection under $50 because they used to offer all of these. All the grinders in today's video are 120 volt grinders, which means they all have a power cord. Let's meet our first angle grinder. This is the Harbor Freight Warrior angle grinder, priced at just $14.99. The motor is rated for 4.3 amps at 12,000 RPMs. The power switch for this grinder is a locking slide switch. The Warrior angle grinder is 9.5 inches long. It weighs in at 3 pounds, 9.7 ounces. And with a grinding wheel, it weighs 3 pounds and 14.9 ounces. Our second grinder is priced at $29.99. It's the Bauer 7 amp angle grinder. This grinder is rated at 11,000 RPMs. This Bauer angle grinder also has a sliding lock switch. The Bauer 7 amp grinder is 10 inches long, and total weight of this grinder is 4 pounds and 6.5 ounces. And with a grinding wheel, 4 pounds, 11.9 ounces. The third angle grinder that Harbor Freight offers under $50 is priced at $44.99. It's the Bauer 8 amp angle grinder. This grinder is rated at 11,500 RPMs, and this one has a paddle switch. The Bauer 8 amp angle grinder looks like it measures 10.5 inches long, and it weighs in at just over 5 pounds. If we add a grinding wheel, we're looking at 5 pounds, 6.8 ounces. Here's my plan for performance testing. We're going to test each of these grinders' ability to cut and to grind steel. The steel that we're going to be using is 1/8 inch thick, 2-inch angle iron. Let's talk for just a second about safety. Grinders make a ton of flying debris. The #1 cause for eye injuries is flying objects, so you want to make sure you're protecting yourself. I've put together a list of affiliate links down in the video description of some of my favorite protection gear. Some of you also might have noticed my hot water tank in the background there. This is the water that I got out of that tank. I did a whole video on cutting this thing open and why this thing turned my water brown. I'll put a link to that video down in the video description as well. With each of the grinders, I'm going to grind for 5 solid minutes using the flapper disc. And then I'll switch as fast as I can over to the cutoff wheel and I'll cut the steel. To finish it up, I'll pull a temperature with a laser thermometer. For our performance testing, each grinder will have a brand new flapper disc and a brand new cutoff wheel. This is an 80 grit Benchmark Abrasives flapper disc. After 5 minutes of continuous grinding with the Warrior angle grinder, I removed the sanding disc and installed the cutoff wheel, and I used it to cut through the angle iron. The Warrior 4.3 amp angle grinder, it's a pretty capable grinder. It cuts steel and it grinds steel. I've had a couple of these over the years, and at $14.99, it's pretty easy to replace. This thing gets hot. 152 degrees the housing got, and the body, 145. I'm not a big fan of the sliding lock switch because if you have it in the locked on position and it comes unplugged, if you plug it in and don't take it off, it's gonna take off. Kind of dangerous. Just like the Warrior 4.3 amp grinder, I'm grinding the steel with an 80 grit disc for 5 solid minutes. Then I'm switching over to the cutoff wheel. At $29.99, the 7 amp Bauer angle grinder did a pretty good job of grinding and cutting steel. This little guy is pretty compact in your hand. I think it's the smallest diameter of all three of these grinders. It did get hot, 140 degrees on the housing and 130 degrees on the plastic body part. And again, it has that locking slide switch. 5 more minutes of grinding, this time with the Bauer 8-amp grinder. I switched over to the cutoff wheel, but I had a catastrophic wheel failure. Pretty uncommon, really. I put on a new grinding wheel and I finished off my cut. The $45 Bauer angle grinder is 8 amps, performed about the same as the 7 amp. The noticeable difference here is the diameter and the paddle switch. The trigger lock for the paddle is a small button on the side. Once locked, the smallest tap of the paddle will release the lock. And that's a safety mechanism. When you let off, it stops. This thing got up to 130 degrees and it noticeably weighs over 5 pounds. I put the $100 Hercules grinder through the same testing parameters as the previous 3 grinders. New flapper disc for 5 minutes of continuous grinding, followed up by cutting the steel with a cutoff wheel. How did these 3 grinders under $50 compare to this $100 Hercules grinder? This is a 13 amp grinder and it weighs nearly 6 pounds with a grinding wheel. The overall length of this thing is right at 15 inches. After grinding and cutting steel for 5 minutes, the housing got up to 133 degrees, but the body was only 104. I definitely felt a power difference with this thing because it's a beast and it just chewed right through that steel. Every handyman should have a grinder. If all you have is $15, this will do the job, but these are better options. If you need more power, maybe you should go with the Hercules. I made a complete unboxing and review video for this grinder, and here's the link to that video. I'm glad you watched, and I hope you'll watch again.